afternoon's highlight in Bournemouth was Ming Campbell's conference address. The party's foreign affairs spokesman made a wide-ranging speech which tackled sanctions against Iraq and opposed America's plans for a national missile defence system. Mr Campbell demanded the lifting of all non-military sanctions against Saddam Hussein's regime and also called for Britain to supply a battalion of troops to UN peacekeeping forces in Sierra Leone. The session's agenda saw the party continue its campaign for constitutional reform and consider Britain's relationship with the European Union. But the afternoon began with delegates voting overwhelmingly for equal legal rights for gay couples. Only a handful of those attending conference opposed a motion calling for a system of civil partnerships to allow gay partners to legally cement their relationship.
If we can settle down, I'm quite keen to start this debate as soon as possible to get as many speakers in. Before I do, I'd just like to announce the results of the emergency ballot for your information. The future of the Community Health Council's motion was one of the motions accepted, and that will be debated 9 to 9:30 on Wednesday. And the other motion that's successful through the ballot is on national missile defence, and that will be 9:30 on Thursday. Before we move into the debate on F-16, I'd just like to draw your attention to, if you just flip over the page in your agenda, and to remind you that we will be having a separate vote at the end of this motion on line 19, 2H. And after having done that, if I ask Susan Kramer to come to the podium and ask Arnie Gibbons if he would stand by, please. Susan, thank you very much. Sorry.
Well, I thank you, Conference. I can tell that the Guardian fringe is still going on. This issue of civil partnerships actually played a fairly large role in the London mayoral campaign. And you really could not have put a sliver between the positions of the five main candidates. We had a slight wobble from Frank, but basically, across the political spectrum, and I give some real credit to Steve Norris from the Tories, we held together on this issue, and there was an absolute commitment to the rightness of civil partnerships, to the rightness of challenging discrimination, and I believe this is one of the proudest things that came out of that London mayoral race. The proposition that you have before you is a very simple one, and if I just state the core of it, it's that any two unrelated people over 16 should be allowed to enter into a civil partnership in order to organise their common life. And it calls for a scheme for the civil registration of such partnerships. Now, this is to establish a basic set of principles. It is not meant to be a comprehensive document discussing every aspect and every angle. That is for later. But this is to put us on record that we understand the requirements of social justice, that we understand human rights, and we are determined that discrimination should clearly be told it has no place in the Liberal Democrat agenda. We are willing to see civil partnerships as a way of moving forward for those in our society who either choose not to get married, many heterosexual couples today make that particular choice, and for people who are gay and lesbian and cannot be married. And I do stress, this is actually not a proposal for gay marriage, despite every headline you may have seen this morning. That, I think, is another debate, an interesting one and another debate. But this motion has been moved because it recognises that people today in their real lives have very serious problems. They have difficulties, they suffer, and those problems have to be dealt with within the framework of law. And I found today, when I've been doing interviews on this, on the radio and television, people say, oh, wait a minute, this is some far-out fringe idea. And then, when you start to give the examples that led to this motion, there's a complete change in the discussion. If I talk about a young woman who a few weeks ago was in a car accident, her lesbian partner of 15 years cannot, under the law, be named as next of kin. It was her estranged parents who were next of kin, who made the decisions of when to turn off the life support machine, who decided that her lesbian partner should not be permitted to come to her bedside, who decided that her partner should not be allowed to the funeral. That is the law as it stands today. The Soho bombing, a tragedy, a young woman was murdered. Her husband qualified for compensation under the criminal injuries compensation provisions. But a gay man who was killed in that same incident, his lifelong partner could not qualify. Again, say that on the air to people who call themselves Middle England and who say they're not particularly interested in gay rights, that they say, that is not fair, you better do something about it. Situations where people have found themselves unable to be named as beneficiaries in pensions, people who have had to sell their homes because they aren't protected by various aspects of inheritance law. The confusion that many children find themselves with when they are raised by a couple, but only one is the recognized parent and there's complete lack of clarity on their legal relationship with the other effect parent. And all of those situations that lead to problems in people's daily lives. Now, you could say to me, well, tackle them issue by issue. But these issues take 15 years to move through the courts. They cost a fortune. You fight them on every front, and in the meantime, each individual goes through genuine misery. And it's time that we had the courage to say they all stem from the same cause. We need to simply set in place the framework that recognizes the reality of today, which is that many couples in our society form long-term relationships. They may be gay, they may be lesbian, they're very often heterosexual, and those people too need the protection of law to be able to enjoy those stable relationships. One of the ironies to me is that if you support family life, and if you think stability matters in society, and I do, then this is a choice that you would obviously make, recognizing civil partnerships and giving people the legal protection and the support that they need to live their lives as a long-term couple. Can I also say, for people who think this is a new or revolutionary idea, well, someone did point out to me that the first time in England that civil relationships were recognised was in 1653 by the bare-bones Parliament. But without even digging back into distant history, that if you look at the international scene, as you would expect, the Nordic countries, brilliant, civil partnerships or similar structures available to their citizens. But Catholic France has a similar law. In fact, the language in the motion you're looking at is based on the French law passed a year ago. Catalonia, you can look at a whole list of countries. Holland, about 2 weeks ago, passing a law that essentially put same-sex relationships and heterosexual relationships outside of marriage for legal purposes on the same footing as married couples. And in English law, the shift is strongly underway. The Fitzpatrick case, which recognised in the House of Lords, recognised a gay couple as a family. Immigration law, which now treats, in effect, partners of the same sex, partners of a different sex but not married, and partners who are spouses in pretty much the same way for the purposes of deciding on permission to enter this country. And another one, which I absolutely love because it is so typical of the way we do law in this country, if you want to be eligible for legal aid, since last May, your same-sex partner's income will be part of the means testing to decide whether or not you qualify. So when it works against you, that's the government has been good on Section 28, but this is our chance to put our words down on paper and in front of them and say that it is time to go forwards. And if I have enough time, I would just like... Pardon?
Very quickly, please.
Very quickly. There's just a quote that moved me so much that's one of the reasons why I moved this motion. And let me read it to you. It says, gays and lesbians in same-sex life partnerships are as capable of permanent, committed, intimate, monogamous, loyal and enduring relationships, of furnishing emotional and spiritual support, and of providing physical care, financial support, and assistance in running the common household. They are individually able to adopt children, and in the case of lesbians, to bear them. In short, they have the same ability to establish life partnerships. That is not a statement by a revolutionary gay rights group. That is an opinion written by Justice Ackerman, part of a unanimous decision of the Constitutional Court of South Africa. Africa that we so often consider to be retrograde in issues of discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation, I think it's time that we caught up. Liberal Democrats, we're the party of social justice. I ask you to act and to pass this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. Will Sarah Bedford of Watford please stand by? And I call Councillor Gibbons from Leicester South.
Can I just point out, Chair, I'm no longer a councillor for reasons which may become obvious. Last October, my partner and I exchanged rings in New York because that's halfway between where his home was in California and mine in Leicester. In the last year, we've been setting up home together, and we have encountered a number of problems, many of which revolve around the issues listed in lines 12 through to 19. Now, some of these we can sort out with the appropriate legal document, with the right wills, enduring power of attorney, deeds, pension. But that's fine if you're affluent, articulate, middle class, and you feel happy picking up the phone and calling your solicitor. That's not the reality for a lot of people. It's also an awful lot of trouble. We want one piece of paper that says these rights will come to you. Then there are other issues within this list where no matter what pieces of paper we produce, as it stands at present, we do not have that equality in the face of the law. Consider the situation where the partner dies without having made a will. Under the intestacy law, their estate will go to their parents, perhaps people they've not spoken to for 10 years, because the parents are unable to accept their son or daughter's sexuality. And even if you have made a will, as Susan says, inheritance tax liabilities, which would not exist if you had a heterosexual couple in a married relationship, would force the home to be sold and the surviving spouse to move out. And immigration. Ideally, my partner and I would like to be living in America now, where he had a career, a job, and a lifestyle he enjoyed. But quite simply, had I been heterosexual, I would have been eligible for a visa and I would now be living there. Because that is not the case. I'm still here. We've decided to set up home in England, and it means I'm still active in the party. So you get something out of it. But that has meant my partner has made a real sacrifice because of that discrimination we suffer. And there have been some improvements as regards immigration into the UK. One of the few things where Jack Straw has been moving in the right direction. It's not all the way there, but there have been some improvements. Now, there has been some talk in the run-up to this about the detail and there being elements of this that may not be 100% perfectly correct. This is a policy motion. This is not legislation. This is not even draft legislation. This is a statement of where we stand. And on the separate vote, do not forget the party already has policy on adoption. And don't forget that that policy is and remains, whatever happens with the separate vote, that the needs of the children come first. To remove line 19 would be a retrograde step. It would be going backwards. Now, the Liberal Democrats have had a lot of favourable coverage in the pink press of late. This week's pink paper. Page 2, we have Sarah Ludford. We have an editorial praising the party. Conference, I ask you, don't destroy a decade's worth of good work by not passing this motion today. I often refer to the party as my extended family and Conference as the annual clan gathering. I'm asking you, as my extended family, to reaffirm my relationship with my partner by supporting this motion.
Thank you very much. Will Vanessa Dow of Kensington Chelsea please stand by? And I call Sarah Bedford from Watford.
Thank you. Last week, Matthew and I celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary. And yes, thank you, we've had all the jokes about the 7-year itch. We've got 2 reasons to be happy. Firstly, because we've had 7 very happy years of marriage and hopefully many more to come. But also because we were able to register our partnership, our love and our wish to build a family unit and take advantage of the public and legal recognition that goes with it. Other people, as we heard, are not so lucky. Although this motion is not aimed specifically at gay and lesbian couples, it is obvious that this is how it will be portrayed. Heterosexual couples already have the opportunity of a religious or state marriage, although some may of course wish to take advantage of this new method of registering their partnership. And that's of course where the public criticism starts to come in. Putting gay and lesbian relationships on a par with heterosexual couples is seen by some as being somehow offensive, even sadly by some within this party. It's Section 28 all over again. The issue of equality to me is simple, and in our Constitution, it's simple. We believe the role of the state is to enable individuals to take part in decisions which affect their lives. That's part of our preamble. We reject all prejudice based on discrimination based on sexual orientation. It just couldn't be any clearer. Sometimes we complicate even the most simple of issues, and it takes someone to find a way through this moral maze. And in my case, I found that person very close to home. Earlier this year, on one of those damp, cool Saturdays that we all know is Wimbledon fortnight, I finally kept a promise I'd made 11 years ago. This was a promise to march, or meander in this case, through the streets of London with many Liberal Democrat friends, new and old, on what was previously termed Gay Pride but is now Mardi Gras. Our then 3-year-old daughter was given the choice of a day out in London with me or doing the housework and shopping with Matthew, and unsurprisingly Sainsbury's lost. We had a great day. The walk was gentle, the music inspiring. Harriet was carried by piggyback all the way from Hyde Park to Westminster. Even the weather held just. As we sat on the embankment eating our picnic lunch, I decided to try and explain to Harriet what our carnival parade had been about. I was able to build on a previous conversation I'd had with her about racism and race hate when she'd seen that on the news. You know how Mum and Dad fell in love and got married and wanted to build a family together, I said. Well, sometimes it's not a man and a woman who fall in love. Sometimes it's two men or it's two women. And very sadly, some people think that's wrong and they want to stop them. So we were marching to say, we think it's okay to love whoever you want, whether it's a man or a woman. And I sat back. Harriet looked out across the Thames for a moment, and I worried as to what her reaction would be. Then she turned to me and said, well, I think it's nice for people to have someone to love and to hug, and it doesn't matter if they're a man or a lady or if they're black, but I'm still going to marry James when I'm 21. James, I may say, is not the chair, but one of her classmates. Too often it takes a child to show us that prejudice is not something that we're born with. It's something we unfortunately learn and take on ourselves of our own choice. So if you're tempted to vote against this motion, can I ask you just to take a minute and think why? Is it so bad that people should fall in love with another adult and want the legal recognition that goes with that for their partnership? If a young child is able to be so matter-of-fact about the human need to love, to be loved, and to have that love recognised, why are we adults so keen to interfere in what is actually somebody else's private business? Voting for this motion means supporting love, equality, partnership, and as Susan Kramer said, stability and family values, rather than hate, prejudice and isolation. Think, conference. Do you, as Liberal Democrats, have any choice as to how to cast your vote today? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can Tim Pascal... Sorry to speed you up, conference, but I want to get as many people in as possible. Can Tim Pascal please stand by, and I call Vanessa Dow to speak against the motion as a whole.
Conference, I'd like to be able to support this motion. As Liberal Democrats, our fundamental values lie in fairness and equality, and we should have no shame in any of that. And the preamble to this motion reaffirms our beliefs, but I can't support the motion. It's seriously deficient and on 2 counts. It's inequitable and it's unclear. Let me deal with lack of clarity first. It purports to propose a legal basis for relationships other than marriage, something other than offered by church or existing civil ceremonies. It's apparently for 2 people who, for their own reasons, and their own reasons we must respect, choose not to marry, or for gender reasons are unable to do so. I regret that it's not about gay marriage. I think as a party we should welcome that, and in due course I hope that we will have motions before conference where we debate that issue too. I would like to turn to paragraph 2, section 8. I beg your pardon, I'm sorry, I'm losing my track here. If it's intended to be for same-sex and heterosexual relationships, we should also welcome it on the basis of equity. But we need clearly to understand the intention of the motion. It lacks clarity and clouds the issue. But conference, it's also inequitable. What does unrelated mean? Paragraph 1 of the motion. Unrelated people over 16. People over 16 wishing to marry can be related. Cousins can marry, but they don't qualify for registered civil partnerships. Is this equality? I don't think so. Susan Kramer, in moving the motion, claimed it's a simple motion to set out the principles of civil partnerships. If that's the intention, then again here the motion is confused and unclear. Paragraph 2 lists 8 areas to be encompassed by the new legal status of civil partnerships. This seems more like detail to me than a principle. And the principle doesn't need this list for Liberal Democrats to accept the motion. But here again, it's importantly and seriously deficient. The motion ignores entirely the rights of any child of a civil partnership. Paragraph 2, Section 8 deals with adoption and fostering, and is taken from the perspective of adults in a civil partnership. But these partnerships may well have natural children too. The rights of these children are completely ignored, indeed of all children are completely ignored. Kensington and Chelsea Party submitted an amendment to the draft motion stating that the rights and duties of all children of such civil partnerships should be equal to those of children of married relationships. The amendment was not taken, and I regret that. And the motion we have before us carries this fundamental and, I believe, unforgivable flaw. Delga says the rights of children can be dealt with elsewhere. It's too important an issue to be covered in one line. Less important than the rights of people to adopt and foster? I don't think so. The motion is therefore not only deficient in its principle of equality, nor is it only a set of principles. It's unclear and it fails on both counts. Conference, let's welcome, really genuinely welcome, the principles behind the motion, but vote against it as drafted for its lack of clarity and its failure to protect children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will Jean Gabitas please stand by from Aylesbury? And I now call Tim Pascal from Brussels and Luxembourg Party, who is speaking for the motion as a whole. Tim.
Amsterdam, actually, a suburb of Brussels and Luxembourg. Many couples in Holland saw 9/9/99, September the 9th, 1999, as a lucky day on which to get married. The national news that night reported 2 such weddings, one gay, one straight, both equal, without comment. Although strictly speaking, the gay one was still only a civil partnership. The government bill allowing full marriage, including the right to adopt and foster, was passed by the Parliament's second chamber by 109 votes to 33 last Tuesday. It should be on the statute books within 2 weeks. Both ceremonies were, after all, the same. 2 people making their commitment to each other, to make one life of the 2, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until the end of their days. The institution of marriage enhanced, not destroyed. It's divorce that does that. 2 couples getting together in happiness and joy. Public promises witnessed by family and friends. How different to 2 others who should have been in this hall today, but for a little problem of fuel. Harry and Peter, not married for 50 years. They first fell in love and so broke the law 20 years before Wolfenden. They had only their love to support them. For them there was no service of commitment in the marriage vows, no children to bind them together, no society to support their relationship, only laws forbidding their love and wagging heads of disapproval were on offer. If 50 years of frowned-on love is not evidence of a marriage made in heaven, then what is? Peter Pears was asked in Desert Island Discs what the high point had been in his life. Without a doubt, he said, my life with Benjamin Britten. Is that not true love? Is it not time that all of us, Christians included, recognize that love? Many do, including some Catholic priests with whom I trained, although they can't make a noise of it. St. Paul may have written a couple of sentences condemning homosexual acts, but he was a man of his time. He also wrote whole chapters on how women should be subjugated to men. He saw nothing wrong with slavery. and so-called Christian principles lay behind the Holocaust, the killing of 6.5 million Jews, held responsible in perpetuity for the death of Christ. That's what I was taught when I was young, happily a principle later abandoned by the Second Vatican Council. Give love a chance was the call of the 60s, but 80s Britain put that one to death. Making money and me became more important. Yet if human life is not about love, then also, in St. Paul's words, it is as empty as a booming gong or a clashing cymbal. I may understand all the mysteries of life, know everything, have the faith to move mountains, but if I have no love, then I am nothing at all. In sex, I can go either way, said George Michael on the Parkinson Show, but I fell in love with a man. Love decides it. Should society stand in the way, or help and encourage him and thousands more along the path of love? Recognizing that love through a form of marriage would be help and encouragement. Our present set of prejudice laws an obstacle, forcing the young behind the bushes. That is sex without love. Give love a chance, my noble peers, I wrote in The Guardian. Give love a chance, all of you, Christians included, by supporting the motion with enthusiasm and without opposition. Because if this is the thin end of the wedge to enhancing the institution of marriage, then wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being so brief. Can Dr. Evan Harris, MP, please stand by? And Jean Gabatas is speaking particularly against line 19.
Thank you, fellow delegates. Well, when I saw the motion, it reminded me of when I was invited by Delga, I think it was 2 years ago, to debate this. And my conclusion was that they had given very careful thought, and unlike the lady from Chelsea, I hadn't got her perceptions. I felt that it had been very carefully worded and that they had taken on board the fear that I had, and that was the use of the word marriage. I saw no reason to come and speak this afternoon because there's also a separate vote on 19. But then I was concerned by the media this morning, the television, the news, the headlines. And so really, I will be very brief. I will commend what you have used as your title, civil partnerships. And I would commend again that, unlike the previous very eloquent speaker, that you do avoid the word marriage to avoid confusion in the minds many of our voters who are married and who might feel something perhaps that they shouldn't feel by your wishes to pursue this idea of civil partnerships. I have a concern for our married supporters, and I would ask those who are involved in this campaign to continue in this very moderate and very sensible way and continue with this title of civil partnerships. I, like one of the previous speakers, have still got a concern for the rights of the child. I do understand people's desire to love and care for children, particularly these days when we hear so many tragic stories and we know there is a campaign for more adoptees. But nevertheless, in those situations, we must ensure that the rights of the child, where they can make a choice, should be observed. And I would urge caution on that point 8, line 19. I do also commend the way that the movers of this propose to go forward with careful discussion with the government. And I think careful discussion and measured wording is very important. I confess to you that in what I thought was a careful reading of this, I actually failed to appreciate line 4 that said any to unrelated programme. I thought this was primarily just a gay rights issue, seeing it was put in by Delga. I wonder whether or not that causes some confusion. But we have in the news recently seen a couple of people who worked in the National Health Service find themselves about to come to retirement age and have very carefully and moderately got a great deal of public sympathy because they are concerned for each other and their pension rights. And this is mentioned in your policy motion here. So even though perhaps you may not see the point, quite such a point of this as I do, I would urge you to continue with this title, civil partnerships, and not to cloud the issue and use the word marriage. It would involve, as I said at the Delga meeting 2 years ago, a rewriting of the definition of marriage according to the law of this country. That would immediately put some people's backs up, make many Christian people feel unhappy about it because they accept a certain doctrine and a certain level of teaching, and arise in them a conflict which is not necessary. Many of our supporters throughout the country are Christians and adopt certain principles because of the teaching that they've been given, and it would be very unfortunate if we appear to push their views on one side. So keep to this title and follow these principles, and I think then a great deal of fairness and justice could be achieved.
Jean, under your notes there is a red light. Thank you very much. Can Sue Vincent please stand by? And I now call Dr. Evan Harris, who is speaking for the retention of line 19.
In the film Annie Hall, it was pointed out to the Woody Allen character Alvy that his son was now being brought up by two mothers after his wife had left him for another woman. He commented, "I found it hard to survive even one mother." Sorry, Mum. But conference, the evidence is not on Alvy's side. Research shows that children in same-sex relationships are as happy, well-adjusted, and have the same likelihood of being homosexual or heterosexual as children from comparison heterosexual couples. The two key issues for Liberal Democrats in this debate are a presumption of equality and the primacy of the welfare of the child. If we start from a presumption of no prejudice, of equal rights for lesbians and gay men as employees, as citizens, as parents, we have to find clear and compelling evidence of adverse effects on children before taking a different view which restricts those freedoms and human rights which our party feels so strongly about. There is now extensive research from academic departments in Europe and the United States appraising the psychosexual and psychiatric aspects of personalities of children brought up in lesbian and gay households. The research shows no differences between the children of lesbian and between heterosexual mothers in either gender identity or sexual behaviour. There was no evidence of inappropriate gender identity among the children of lesbian mothers, and age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate friendships and good peer relationships were observed in both groups, and both groups were equally well-adjusted and tolerant. Professor Susan Gollenbach of City University has followed up children in fatherless families over many years and has found no evidence in such children up to the age of even 23 and 24 in follow-up of a greater likelihood of identifying as homosexual. So far in this Parliament, Liberal Democrats have proposed many amendments to legislation seeking to implement our commitment to equality. The Labour Party in their manifesto said they will seek to end unjustifiable discrimination wherever it exists. So we expected support from the Labour Party. But when the Liberal Democrats proposed amendments to equalise pension rights, the Labour Party voted those down. When we proposed amendments to equalise taxation rules, the Labour Party said no. To tackle hate crimes, the Labour Party said no. To equalise sexual offences, the Labour Party said no. To equalise employment discrimination rights, the Labour Party voted it down. In all these issues, we had the situation of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party joined in what I will describe as an unnatural union against equality and freedom. The Labour Party must come clean. Their manifesto commitment to seek to end unjustifiable discrimination wherever it exists. Either they believe there is justifiable discrimination in these areas, or they have clearly broken a manifesto commitment many times over. It was sad that when this policy was announced in the press, it was the Independent's political editor that described this policy as extreme. I think it's extreme to oppose this sort of measure. And to the last speaker, I would say we're not forcing or even asking Christians or other people with a particular religious perspective to marry someone of the same sex. We're just asking them to allow other people the sort of equalities and freedom that they would expect to get for themselves. Before the last general election, in our lesbian and gay guarantee, we committed ourselves to equality for fostering and adoption rights for lesbians and gay men. Today is an opportunity to carry that guarantee into formal party policy. This motion is a signal to progressive-minded Britain that we are the only party who can be trusted to put children's welfare and equality before prejudiced assumptions. Please support the motion in all its parts.
Thank you very much. Will Sarah Ludford please stand by? I now call Sue Vincent from Reigate, who is speaking against the motion as a whole.
Conference, I want to speak against the motion, not because I'm against the idea of civil partnerships, because I'm not, but because this particular motion is inadequate, badly written, and does not go far enough. Firstly, it entrenches discrimination against gay couples by not offering them the option of civil marriage. Under these proposals, equality will not be achieved. Heterosexual couples will have 3 options: marriage, cohabitation, civil partnerships. Lesbian and gay couples will only have 2 options. That there is a demand for gay marriage can be seen by the recent decision in Amsterdam, as stated earlier. They've had civil partnerships, and they still wanted to go ahead and legalise gay marriage. There's a demand for it. Many gay people want to get married. Let's face it. For many couples, gay couples or straight couples, when you want to make that commitment, that public commitment to each other, you want a ceremony, you want confetti. You don't nipping down to the town hall to sign a contract is hardly romantic or much fun. Secondly, I don't agree that this motion is simply worded. There's lots of things wrong with the wording. It doesn't actually make it clear that you can only have one of these partnerships at a time. When through the wording, it effectively gives the green light for bigamists. Liberal Democrats, the party of bigamy. Sorry, it's just the wording. I can't help it. Third, and I also think the age of Can you just let me speak? Thank you. The age of 16 is problematic if this is a kind of contractual business in English and Welsh law, as under 18s can't make valid contracts. Will they have to get parental permission, like with marriage under 18? I don't really understand the difference between these partnerships and civil marriage for heterosexual couples. I'd like that explained properly in this motion. I also agree with the problem with cousins, as stated by Vanessa earlier. I don't see why cousins should be discriminated against. Finally, it doesn't deal in any way with how you dissolve one of these partnerships. How do you divorce your civil partnership partner? And what will happen to your natural children? There's nothing about your rights and responsibilities of the partners to do with natural children. I believe this motion makes an enormous change to English law and should not become party policy without a great deal more work and input from various groups of people, including women, gay people, lone parents, family lawyers. I urge you to vote against this motion so we can think again and have a properly thought out policy on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Can Richard Coxon please stand by? I now call Sarah Ludford to speak for the motion as a whole.
To Arnie Gibbons, I say America's loss is Islington's gain, and we've got some leaflets for you to deliver. Colleagues, there is a bar in Brussels called The Ultimate Hallucination, and the reporter from one of our tabloid newspapers must have imbibed its refreshments before he wrote a recent Euromyth story, because what he wrote was pure fantasy. The headline was, "Outrageous EU plot." Notice it's always a plot with its connotations of scheming, cunning and stealth, to force UK to take refugees' gay lovers. I was a bit annoyed about this article, as I knew something about the issue. So I explained to the Pink Paper and others that what the European Union proposes under a scheme for family reunion to cover immigrants and refugees is that where a member state gives legal recognition to unmarried partnerships, it should allow such partners residence in the same way as it would allow a husband or wife. So let us be clear. The European Union is leaving the question, quite properly leaving the question, of whether laws recognise civil partnerships to the national level. But European human rights and equalities law, both the Strasbourg European Convention system and the Brussels EU system, is increasingly providing a supportive framework of anti-discrimination law in which such decisions can be made. And around a third of European Union countries and about 10 European countries altogether do now recognise civil partnerships. Not a Euro myth, but a good news European story. I, like others, approach this issue from the direction of simple social justice. I think it is unfair to deny stable and committed couples, whether heterosexual or homosexual, the benefits of legal certainty and public recognition. And it's a bit rich for the Conservative opponents of such measures to make accusations of fecklessness and promiscuity in the name of family values when they refuse to give such legal recognition. I think all we would be doing today in passing this landmark motion, which develops our existing policy, is to accept the principle and recognise that some of the detail would have to be refined in legislation. My own view is that it is right that this motion does not refer to gay marriage. We need to recognise the genuine sensitivities who feel that marriage is an institution with religious underpinning that it must have a reserved status. And don't forget that some people would prefer not to call a civil partnership a marriage because they reject the religious and social implications. So what I say today is show your true faith in what has passed before in Liberal Democrat policy by resoundingly passing this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Richard Coxon from Edinburgh Central, who is going to summate our discussion.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Conference. People who will know me will be surprised when I say this, but I am literally speechless. Every single line that I thought of has been said by other people for me, but I'm not going to walk off and let you start 3 minutes early. This has been a fantastic debate. Every single speech that's come up here has just got better and better and better. I have to thank Susan for proposing the motion on the behalf of Delga. Absolutely fantastic. She went through this motion in such great depth. Anyone who can bring in the 1653 bare bones Parliament, something I wrote an essay on in history a very, very long time ago, into a motion on civil partnerships, deserves to have been Mayor of London, as far as I'm concerned. And let's get back to the basic principle. What is this motion actually about? And everyone else has said this, but I'm going to say it again because I wrote it. It's about saying to the people of this country, we believe as Liberal Democrats in an end to discrimination, and we believe in an end to discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation. This party has perhaps been the only party in the House of Commons, thank you Evan, and throughout the country to actually say to people, discrimination is wrong, and we believe it to be wrong wherever we find it. And what this motion seeks to do is to set up a scheme of civil partnerships, that's all it says, that will allow people, whether they're heterosexual or homosexual, gay couples, lesbian couples, straight couples, whatever, to say to the state, we are together. We are two people as one. We wish to organise our common life together, and we wish you as the state to recognise that we have ordered our common life together. Now, as a gay man, I can't do that. It's illegal for me to do that. I can't do it. I can get, as Arnie said, better than I could. There are things I can do by being a member of the articulate, chattering, Guardian, reading middle classes. I know there are things I can do with solicitors and with lawyers and with pieces of paper and stamps and documents and shouting at people to get that recognised. I can have a joint reward card at Sainsbury's. No, really, I can. Seriously. They didn't sound as if they were very convinced, but I can, and all power to Sainsbury's now that it's not blue, it's a nice red colour. But all power to them, I can do that. You know, I can let my partner collect reward points for me. But if I'm in hospital and I'm on a life support machine, he can't decide whether that machine gets switched off or not. That's the state of English law today, and it makes me laugh. And then you hear stories of people, the people who suffered in the Soho bombings. You hear of the story of Martin Fitzpatrick, and that makes me cry and not laugh. It's so funny, it can't be true, but it is. It is true. Discrimination exists in this country, and this party is the only party prepared to seek it out and destroy it. I will just say one thing. This is a motion of principle. It is not a detailed policy paper going through every single detail of how this scheme will work. We in Delga didn't feel we could do that by ourselves. We didn't want to do it. We wanted to say to conference, vote for the principle if you believe in it. And if you believe in the principle, let us all come together afterwards and sort out exactly how this scheme is going to work. Therefore, and I will finish because I have a red light, conference, it's been a fantastic debate. Please support the motion in all its forms and let's have an end to discrimination here. Thank you, conference.
Thank you very much, Richard. If I can ask you, please, conference, to get your voting badges ready and unpinned. We're going to have two votes now. The first vote is going to be whether you wish to delete or retain line 19, and then the second vote will be on the motion as a whole. So can I please see those people who wish to delete line 19? Thank you. And those who wish to retain it? That is clearly retained. We now move to vote on the whole motion. Those, please, in favour, please show. Thank you very much. And those votes against? Thank you. This is clearly carried. Thank you very much, conference. I now hand over to Alan Lehman and Jane Smithard for the debate F17 Reforming Governance. Thank you all for your conduct during this debate, and thank you very much, Duncan, for being my aide at this debate. Pleasure.